What is going on, guys? Happy Sunday. All right, in honor of it being Sunday, I'm going to take a sip of some Joe here. Put that down right there. Coffee is meant to be had black. All right, anything else is bullshit. But let's get into this video. Got a treat for you today. All right, I'm going to talk about the silver era. All right, that's the 40s, the 1940s. Bodybuilding era. All right, guys competed like Steve Reeves, all right, John Grimek, Clancy Ross, Alan Stefan, George Eiferman, bunch of classic guys, okay? And those guys, they're still pretty much viewed as the pinnacle of natural bodybuilding, okay? Because once steroids kind of crept into the sport, all right, the lines have been blurred. You never know if someone's natural or not, and usually they're not, all right? It's just the way it is, all right? I'm not saying everyone's unnatural today, but when it comes to natural bodybuilding, no one cares about it, and the rules are pretty lax, all right? So you see a lot of guys that you can obviously tell they're just not natural, okay? And it really is a shame, but that's why I don't compete, all right? It's a joke now. Okay, I just love bodybuilding. I love the training aspect of bodybuilding, and that's why I do it. That's why I make these videos. But today I'm going to be comparing, all right, my measurements to the silver era guys that heavily inspired me to start lifting. And I don't recommend you compare yourself to others, but when it comes to people who inspired you, all right, I do think it's fair to use them as a baseline and kind of to compare your measurements to them. But just know, you are not them, they are not you. Okay, you're gonna have different genetic factors, different life factors. Okay, you're just different people, all right? Like I'll take me, for example, compare myself to Steve Reeves. He genetically had perfect genetics, okay? I'll just put it like that. But his waist was like 29 going on the 30 inches or 31 or whatever. And that was when he was cut down to like 11, 12% body fat on the stage. If I cut down to 11, 12%, my waist is like 1.5 inches bigger than that. All right, it's like just under 33 inches. I don't naturally have a small waist, okay? It's a little blockier, but it still looks great. Or you can see in the footage here, you can see my abs. My chest looks much bigger than it, but that's because I have a very big chest. All right, my chest is probably my most successful body part, I guess you can say. But you can't compare yourself to others because you're different. And I really want to stress that hard here, but it's okay to be inspired by them and to use them as a baseline for numbers to kind of strive towards, all right? But without further ado, let's get into this video. Now, my current measurements, okay, I'll show some footage here. My height is 6 foot. Okay, you guys all know that I'm 6 foot. My weight, 206 pounds. Right, you can see the scale right here. This is a little lower than where I was a few months ago. I was at 210 a few months ago. Now I'm at 206. I stopped eating so much. Okay, I'm on like a slight surplus now, just trying to get enough protein in during the day because I found that I still grow if I'm at around 14, 15% body fat. And that's where I like to be because I still look great and I still get great results. Now my neck, that's 17.25. It used to not be like this. Okay, I do train my neck. I have a Titan Fitness 4-axis neck machine, and I train it about twice a week. All right, usually on my off days, I'll hit some neck, and it's grown it a little over 1 inch. All right, my neck used to only be a little under 16 inches, so almost 1.5 inches of growth there. Pretty impressive, right? But when you train something, that's usually what happens, all right? All right, now my left arm is 17.25, and my right arm is a little smaller at about 17.125. They used to be both about a hair bigger, but again, that was when I was at 210, and it was basically just water weight, all right? I lost it within a few days of changing my diet up, so I don't really think that counts, but there they are, 17.25 for the left, and 17.125 for the right arm. For the left forearm, flexed here at the widest part, is 14 inches, and the right one is a little smaller at 13 3/4. Now my chest has made great strides in the past couple months. It is now at 48 to 48 1/4. It is pretty hard to measure this, but I think I got it the right way here. You guys can see the footage. 48 1/4. That's a big chest for a natural guy. All right, I'm very, very proud of that. And I used to think my arms were basically my my top measurement on my physique, but my chest has pretty much taken that over. Now, as for my waist, I told you guys before, I naturally have a blockier waist. It's at 35 right now. You can see the footage right here. If I cut down to like 10%, it'd probably be just over 33, maybe 33. All right. But again, it's not a thin waist like, you're used to seeing on a lot of the silver era guys. And that's because I used to train obliques very, very hard. And I don't recommend people who want to have a thin waist, a thin appearing waist, to train obliques, but I'll get into that in a little bit because it built up my obliques a lot, all right? And I wouldn't say I regret it, but I'm happy that I learned about it soon enough to stop doing it because, again, I used to do hanging bar, side bends all the time, Russian twists. I used to do Russian twists all the time for baseball because they said it was, really good for baseball players. And I do think it made my waist thicker, but I'll talk about that later and why it's not very ideal for guys who want to look like a silver era bodybuilder. Okay, onto the legs. My left thigh is 26 1/8, and my right thigh is 26 1/4. And my legs they're this big mainly because of my adductors, all right? I squat heavy a lot and it just blew up my legs, okay? I have trouble fitting into pants sometimes. I actually have to get a size up. Can't wear anything below relaxed fit. Like it has to be a relaxed fit or above. No slim fits in my closet, okay? No skinny jeans, absolutely not. They would rip, okay? My adductors are huge. Legs are big, all right? 26 1/8 and 26 1/4. As for the calves, this is something that I just started training, okay? I went a while without training my calves. And it is a huge mistake, okay, because you want your calves to be the same as your arms and your neck. My neck and my arms are the same, but my calves are not, okay? They are both at 15 3/4. I want to get them to 17 inches because then, of course, they'll be at the same measurement as my arm and my neck. Okay, now John Grimek. All right, I'll put his measurements up on the board here. He was 5'8" and a half, weighing in at 195 pounds. His neck, 17 inches. His arms, 17 and a half, both of them. His forearms, both of them 14 inches. His chest was 47. His waist was very slim, 31. And his thighs were 25. And his calves, of course, same as his arms. And his neck at 17 inches. Okay, so of course, I'm a few inches taller, but height doesn't matter in my opinion. You can't control your height, okay? You're born the way you're born. You can't control your height, all right? This guy had a incredible physique, okay? He's undefeated, I'm pretty sure, never lost a competition, and they actually had to put a rule in place back then that if you already won a Mr. Universe or Mr. America, I forgot which competition it was, that if you already won it, you couldn't compete ever again, all right? Because that's just how dominant he was. They put that rule into effect because of him, all right? This guy was a monster, and bodybuilding wasn't even his top thing, okay? His top thing was actually being a gymnast, all right? He was an Olympian, and he was actually a very impressive strongman as well, I'm pretty sure. But my measurements compared to his, I'm bigger in some areas, and then he's bigger in other areas, okay? But I'm right there with the guy, and I'm very proud to say that because this was one of the original guys that I was heavily inspired by. Okay, now on to Steve Reeves. All right, now he is arguably the most aesthetic / greatest bodybuilder of all time. I think he is just by his appearance, okay? He exemplified beauty, proportion, symmetry, all around, okay? Just a great bodybuilder. He didn't exemplify mass for the sake of mass. And you guys see that a lot nowadays. It's just, how big can I get? There's no thought or consideration given to symmetry and proportion. And I think it's killing the sport. All right. A lot of guys just want to get as big as possible. Okay. You should want to get bigger, but you shouldn't sacrifice symmetry and proportion to achieve that. But his measurements, he was 6'1", so taller than me. He weighed 213 pounds. Neck was 17.6 inches. His arms were 17.5. Forearms 14. Chest 48. Waist 31. Again, another guy with a very thin waist. And his thighs were 25.3 inches. Calves at 17.5. So huge calves. Now, these measurements were taken from when these guys won the Mr. America contest. John Grimek won it in 1941 and 1940, I believe. So those are his measurements from that competition. And then Steve Reeves won it in 1947. And those are his measurements taken from that competition date. So obviously these guys are probably much, I wouldn't say much leaner. They didn't get as lean as natural guys do now. All right, natural guys now get to like 7-8%, sometimes 6% body fat, which is ridiculous. And these guys only got to like between 10 and 12. So a lot different. But I do think in their off seasons, they were probably hovering around 15, 16% body fat. And John Grimek was even on stage, they say that he was more like 15% body fat. So just something to be thought about there. Does it make a huge difference in their measurements? I don't really think so, but it is something to think about. And of course, my measurements compared to Steve Reeves, all right, he's bigger in most areas. Okay, I'm bigger in a few, but the main thing that I want to talk about here is how you can't just go by size, all right? Bodybuilding in the 40s, and the whole reason why I'm using these guys, comparing my physique to them, is because that is who I strive to kind of look like, all right? I like that era of physiques. I'm not a big fan of today. Everyone just wants to be as big as possible. And while I do want to get bigger in most areas on my body, there are even some areas that I don't want to grow at all, all right? I'll just use my traps, for example. I don't train my traps, all right? And I don't care to, because I think they are big enough and I don't want to get that rounded look go into my neck, all right, my upper neck. That makes me look more narrow, okay? If you guys notice, guys with big traps, they look more narrow, okay? And if they have, medium-sized or even small traps, their upper shoulder area, it looks more flat, looks more wide, all right? It gives them a wider appearance, and that's what I'm going for, all right? That's what Steve Reeves went for. He didn't train his traps, and he also didn't train his obliques, all right? Because he says in his book, they give you that appearance of a wide and blocky waist, all right? I did a bunch of that when I played baseball, did a bunch of oblique training. I don't regret it because it helped me with baseball and rotational power and all that stuff, but it definitely added to my waist because I remember early on in middle school, I had a very thin waist, all right? It was about 29 inches, okay? And now it's 35. So yes, I weigh a lot more, but to gain that much on my waist, it's definitely from the oblique training. But if you want to look like these guys, training the traps and the obliques, probably not the best idea. But yes, these guys, they did not sacrifice proportion and symmetry for just mass, all right? And you see that a lot today. Guys just want to get big. They're like, all right, I want to get 19-inch arms. I want to get 18, 19-inch arms. I just want to get massive arms. That's okay, but make sure your neck's the same and your calves are right around the same measurement, all right? Because that's going to give you that best look, in my opinion. And if you're asking the question, how do I avoid getting massive in certain areas and then not so big in other areas? You got to measure yourself, all right? You should be measuring yourself every Sunday, I would recommend you to do, all all right? Because if one body part is kind of taken off, okay, I have this with my legs when I squat. If I squat heavy at my legs just blow up, okay? Which is why I'm looking for other quad dominant leg workouts that don't work my adductors as much, okay? But take these measurements because they will tell you every single week what measurements kind of, getting up there, which ones maybe falling behind, and then you'll know how to program your training and how to go from there. And of course, it depends what kind of look you're going for. If you're like me and you prefer the silver era bodybuilding look, then don't train your traps and your obliques, all right? But if you like big traps, all right, you like the crab pose, you guys all know what I'm talking about, that crab pose. If you like that, train the traps, all right? It's that simple. It boils down to which look you prefer. To finish this video, I will answer the question. So am I jacked? All right. I know I'm jacked. All right. But a lot of people online, they seem to think otherwise. Okay. They think I'm not even jacked at all. But comparing my measurements to these guys, all right, the natural standard, I would say, still is the natural standard. You can disagree in the comments. I'm right there with them. So therefore, I'm jacked. All right. Not being cocky. It's just the truth of the matter. Now, you might be asking why I didn't include natural lifters from today. And don't get me wrong, there are tons of great natural lifters out there. All right. There's some outliers who are very big in certain areas, but there are also outliers who had huge arms way back in the 40s. All right. Pretty sure Melvin Wells had like 19 or 20-inch arms. And if you look at his physique, again, massive arms, but didn't really match the rest of his body. So he kind of lacked that symmetry and proportion, but I'll give it to him. The guy had huge, huge arms, okay? But back to what I was saying, why I didn't choose modern natural lifters. I just don't know if people are natural or not, all right? I look at natural Olympia competitions and it's just, even if they're natural when they compete, they're probably not natural when they're not competing. All right. It's just so hard to tell nowadays. All right. And that's not me saying that, there's no great naturals out there today. That's definitely not what I'm saying. There definitely are. All right. And there's probably naturals out there who are bigger than these guys were, who look better than these guys did. But it's hard to tell, which is why I kind of stay away from it because there's so much drug abuse going on right now in the sport. It's just something that I don't really want to get into. And the funny thing is that naturals today are the same size as these guys were. The top naturals today are basically the same size as these guys were, even with all the advancements in science, technology, fitness, okay, everything, supplements, diet, with all of that, basically still the same size. So there's something to be said there, right? These guys in the 40s, they're doing donkey calf raises with their training partner on their back, and they're building 18-inch calves, all right? We have all the machines in the world and still the same size. So what does that go to tell you, all right? Definitely something to be said there. Now, of course, you guys can disagree in the comments, all right? You can, talk about your opinions, and I'll definitely read them. I would love to read them. But I do think those guys from the 40s, the silver era, guys like Steve Reeves, John Grimek, they are still the natural standard. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. All right, of course, you are free to comment down below your opinions if you disagree with me or not. Hopefully we can keep this civil. I know a lot of guys nowadays, they don't know how to keep things civil. They don't know how to have a civil disagreement. Okay, it's just, I'm right, you're wrong. There's no other way. Okay, I'm not saying this is the best way to train. This is, in my opinion, the best way to train for me. All right. If you don't agree with that, power to you. All right. But I do think this was a video worth talking about. And I love the silver era. Those guys were just way ahead of their time. All right. And if you have never picked up any of their books, I definitely recommend you to do that. But of course, as always, Thank you so much for watching. God bless.